What better way to start a Books Beside My Bed video with some vlogception. Hi guys! Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for those who are very familiar with the series, welcome back. If you follow along and are subscribed to my channel, which you can do by clicking the link down below, you will know that I am sort of doing some daily vlogs about my self-isolation story and what I'm doing to stay positive and all that sort of stuff. So if you're interested, you can check those out. That's what the first little clip was. I was just filming a little bit of my setup. So that video would have gone up on Sunday, and this video is the next one. I'm just going to talk about the books that I've read in the last 7 days. I was doing my Read Digital challenge, which is a monthly reading challenge that I host where I have a bingo board. I'll put it up on the screen and I choose books to read from my digital TBR. So for me, that is my Kindle, and I read those books for a week. And this week I did have a set TBR, and then I totally trashed my TBR and read whatever I felt like, because basically with the world being the way that it is, I needed to choose books that were right for me at the moment, and I think I did a pretty good job. So I did end up reading a whole stack of books. This is my reading week from the 22nd until the 28th of March. I read a total of 11 books this week. 8 of those were adult books. 1 was a middle grade book because it's middle grade March and I haven't read any middle grade books, so I had to fit 1 in there somewhere. And I also read 2 picture books, which I'm actually not going to talk about in this video because they haven't been released yet, but I will talk about them in the next week or so, so you'll hear about them. I also DNF'd 2 books, and I DNF'd them pretty quickly. I have found now that I can DNF a book within a couple of pages, particularly if it's not fitting my mental state at the moment. So if anyone wants me to talk about DNFing books, I can do that. But I did DNF 2 books. They were Venom and also The Player and the Prince, which they just didn't grab me at all, and I was not interested in continuing reading them. I read a total of 3,025 pages this week, and my yearly reading total is up to 98 books. I am going to be talking about 9 books, so I'm going to be super brief on them. I actually really enjoyed this week. I think my lowest rating was a 3.5. My highest rating were 4.5, and there was a stack of books that were 4.5s and 4s. So it was a good reading week. I enjoyed all of these books. They were, for the most part, fairly light and fluffy, and most of them were romance books because that's what I needed in my life right now. The first book that I read was A Worthy Opponent by Katie Robert. This is a 2020 release from Trinkets and Tales LLC, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This is book 3 in the Wicked Villains series, which is a series of dark romance retellings of fairy tales or featuring fairy tale characters. I read this for the Choose Your Own Category challenge, and my category was dark romance, or it could have even been fairy tale retellings. I mean, it could have been anything. It was basically a free choice. I have read the other 2 books in this series, and it is essentially a world, or it's set in a city that has been divided up into territories, and different characters rule different territories and they have different rules, and it's all very much political maneuvering and all that sort of thing. And in this particular book, we follow Tinkerbell and Hook. And Tinkerbell has been working for Hades. She struck a deal with him for safety many years before, and now the time for her deal to end has come up, and Hades has basically said she needs to leave the safety of Hades' club and strike out on her own and build her own life. The problem with that is that she struck a deal in order to get away from Peter Pan, who was quite nefarious and a bit of a sinister character in her life. And as soon as she leaves Hades' protection, Peter Pan comes up and interferes with her and infers that he's going to get her back no matter the cost. And she ends up having to strike a deal with Hook to move in with him, and in order for Tink's help in bringing down Peter Pan, Hook will keep her safe. The whole thing is just delightfully dark, and Tinkerbell is or Tink as she's known in the story, is a really sassy character. I really loved her, and she's been a minor character in the other 2 books, so it was nice for her to get her own story, and also to have a story where Hook is not the perfect guy. He's made mistakes and he's done terrible things, but he's also not the bad guy either. So this series is quite good because it blurs the lines between who's good and who's evil and what that actually means, which is why I like the series. And then I read the current 3 books in the VIP series by Kristen Callahan. So the first book is Idol, and this was a 2016 release from Plain Jane Books. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I read it for the challenge to read a book with green on the cover. This follows Killian, who is one of the lead performers in a very famous rock band called Kill John, and he crosses paths with Liberty when he drunkenly drives his motorbike onto her lawn. I can't remember if it's I think it's early evening or something like that. And understandably, Liberty, or Libby as she's known, is not impressed by this behavior. And then she discovers that he's actually her neighbor across the road. We find out that Killian is hiding out in the middle of nowhere because some terrible things have happened to the band. One of his bandmates and best friends tried to kill himself, so trigger warning for attempted suicide, and the band didn't really know how to deal with that. So he's come out here to hide and escape the world, and what he finds is that he really enjoys Libby's company. The two eventually strike up a friendship and the beginnings of a relationship, and then Killian is called back to work. He decides he wants Libby to come along with him. She is also a singer-songwriter, but she just does it for fun, and he convinces her to come along and play some songs with the band, and their sort of romance goes from there. The complications of being in a celebrity romance, all of that sort of thing. My favorite book in the series is book 2, which is Managed, and this is also 2016 release from Plain Jane Books. I read it for the challenge to read the next book in the series, and this book is actually about Killjohn's manager, Gabriel Scott, who is a very by the book, very organized, very terrifying sort of character who is actually terrified of flying. And at the start of the book, he has to fly from, I think, New York to London to meet up with the band, and he flies first class, and then he discovers that someone else has been upgraded to the first class seat next to him when he's previously booked out both seats. As I said, he hates flying, he's really terrified, and Sophie Darling, who never expected to be upgraded to first class, is amazed that she's even there. And then she's sitting next to this grumpy guy and they have this great banter, and she helps him through the flight and actually keeps him calm, and he gets through to the end. And then they realize that Sophie is actually traveling to London to interview for a position to work as Killjohn's social media consultant. This was all arranged by someone else on Gabriel's team, so he didn't know that Sophie was actually a candidate. The two of them just have this delightfully fun, flirty, very witty banter type relationship, and Scotty is awesome, which is basically what the band members call Gabriel. He's one of my favorite characters in the series, and when he pops up again in the third book, you just sort of fall in love with him even more because he's so set in his ways, but you see Sophie begin to help him see that that's not the only way to be. So his character doesn't change dramatically, but you just see these little softening around the edges moments, and it's just gorgeous. So I really, really loved Managed. And then the third book is Fall, and this was also published in 2016 by Plain Jane Books. I read it for the Read Digital Challenge to read a book with a one-word title, and this is Jax's story. Jax is the band member who attempted suicide, and all of that happens before any of the books start. So what we get is references, but if that is a trigger warning for you, beware of that. But we meet Jax in the third book when he's still trying to get a handle on his anxiety / depression, the things that actually triggered his earlier attempt. And at the very start of the book, he's in a supermarket. While he's there, he crosses paths with Stella, who is also there doing her grocery shopping, and the two butt heads a little bit when they both try to get the last carton of mint choc chip ice cream, which I fully support. That's my absolute favorite. Jax is about to take it, but then Sophie decides on spur of a moment she really wants that ice cream, and so she just totally randomly kisses this complete stranger. She doesn't know who Jax is, doesn't recognize him at all, kisses him to distract the ice cream away from him, and then buys it. And they think nothing of it. They don't think their paths are ever going to cross again. That is until Stella house sits in the apartment next to Jax's, and the two do cross paths again. They start to get to know one another, and they form this sort of friendship that's sort of not completely antagonistic, but they like to nitpick at each other a little bit. And then eventually they start to develop a relationship. But the struggle in this relationship is that Jax is still dealing with all of his issues, and Stella herself has a whole stack of issues that she's working through as well. And it doesn't always work for them. So this one probably was a little bit more stressful to read in that there was a lot more push and pull in the relationship, but it was still a really, really good read, and I really enjoyed it. And I should say I got those books were recommended from the Fated Mates podcast. Then I read Act Like It by Lucy Parker, which was a 2015 release from Carita Press. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It is the first book in the London Celebrity series. I did read the most recent release in that series, so I thought I would go back and read some of the other books because they do come highly recommended to me. This was just a bonus book that was on my Kindle. It was not something that I had planned to read, and it doesn't really fit any of the other challenges that I had left. But in this story, we follow Richard Troy, who is sort of the current bad boy of the London theatre scene, and he's currently starring in a play, and in order to lift his image and also the profile of the play that he's currently performing in, the producers decide that he needs to fake date Elaine Graham, who is also starring in the show and is sort of the darling of the stage. She doesn't really have a bad reputation at all, and she has just gone through a breakup with another member of the cast, and you have this delightfully funny back and forth banter as the two really don't want to be seen with one another. They don't particularly like each other at the start of the book, and yet as they get to know each other, they get to see the person behind the performer, really, and it was really, really great. So it had the fake dating trope, it had a bit of an enemies to lovers. They weren't super enemies, but they weren't really friends, and it was just really fun. Then I read Strangelove by Anna Guia, which was a 2019 Kindle Unlimited release. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I read it for the challenge to read a book with between 300 to 350 pages, and depending on where you look it up, the page count on this one changes. I don't know, so we'll just go with it. This is book 1 in the Galactic Love series, and it's honestly a book that probably shouldn't have worked, but really did. So bear with me as I try to explain this one. It is a sci-fi romance, and we follow Zyla of Kith Balak, who is he's a cinnamon roll character. Honestly, he's a beta hero. He's not an alpha hero. And he's trying to find a bride, and he's gone through the choosing 4 times, and the deal on his world is that you can only go through it 5 times, and then basically you lose your rank and privilege. And the choosing is when you go through a series of competitions and challenges in order to find your perfect mate, essentially. He's resorted to trying to use a matchmaking service to find a mate from a different planet, and along the way to pick up this mate, he accidentally kidnaps Beryl from Earth and her dog. Her dog is awesome. He doesn't intend to kidnap her, he thinks he's saving her, and then something happens to his ship and he can't return her to Earth. Beryl is this wonderfully sunshine, lovely, lovely female character who takes lots of things in her stride, and after she gets over the shock about being kidnapped by an alien and ending up on an alien planet, she sort of tries to see things for the way that they are. She ends up taking part in the choosing tournament in order to help Xylath out, and it was just a really fun, entertaining sci-fi romance read. I don't know what else to say about it. Honestly, it should not work, but it did. It is what it is. Then I read Race to the Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a 2020 release from Disney Hyperion. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I read it for the challenge to read a middle grade book, and this is part of the Rick Riordan Imprints line, or Rick Riordan Presents line, I think it's called. This is about 7th grader Nizoni, and they did say how to pronounce her name in the book, but I think I've forgotten how to pronounce it properly. Anyway, she's in 7th grade, and she has recently been able to see monsters. So if a monster is disguised as a human, she can tell. She discovers that the man who is about to hire her father, Mr. Charles, is a monster, and he's very, very interested in her and her brother Mac. When Mr. Charles kidnaps their father, Nizoni, and her brother Mac, and her best friend Davery need to go on a quest in order to find a series of objects that will help them earn the weapons that it will take to defeat Mr. Charles and the other monsters. And it is just a really fun middle grade adventure story with Native American undertones in it, and I really, really enjoyed it. Then I read Lingus by Mariana Zapata, which is a romantic comedy story. I think it was a 2016 release from Kindle Unlimited, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was just really fun. This was just a bonus book. It doesn't really fit any of the extra challenges that I had left, but we follow Tristan and Kat when Kat is dragged off to a porn convention with her best friend. Their paths cross unexpectedly, and they have this really great banter and conversation, and everything's going really, really great until Kat discovers that Tristan is actually a porn star, and she doesn't quite know how to feel about that because she thought that they could have had quite a good friendship. He felt the same way, and so he actually asks her to be his friend because he doesn't have very many friends. He finds it really hard to manage his personal life and his working life and his filming life. The two have this friendship, and even though Kat sort of wants something more, she figures the friendship is better than nothing. The two spend a lot of time together. Kat even helps him pick out a rescue puppy that they call Yoda, and I think this massive big dog, and they call it Yoda because Tristan is a closet geek, which I love. Ultimately, it's a story about acceptance and about finding love in strange places, and the whole thing was just really, really funny. But it is a romantic comedy. Sometimes the language in it is a bit weird enough. I didn't find it offensive because I think in the context of when you're reading the story and the people that you meet in the story, you can understand where it's coming from. But I know for some people, they don't like a lot of language and or smutty scenes in their books, so beware. And the final book that I read this week was On the Edge by Ilona Andrews, which is the first book in the Edge series. This was a 2019 release on Kindle, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. This was another bonus read. It didn't fit any of the other challenges. This is a bit of a weird one to try and describe because I love Ilona Andrews. I love the books put out by Ilona Andrews, but this one I found it hard to keep track of some things, but it is again the first book in a series, so it was always going to be a little bit tricky to sort things out. Essentially, the world is divided up into 3 parallel sections. So you have the broken, which is sort of the more mundane earth human side, like our world, and then you have the edge, which sits next to it, and on the other side of the edge is the weird. So the weird is the magical world, the broken is the human world where magic doesn't work, and the edge sort of straddles both. Not everyone can travel between all 3 parallel worlds. We follow Rose and her 2 brothers, George and Jack, and they live in the edge, and they're trying to carve out this meager existence. Rose has quite a lot of power, and this makes her very desirable to a lot of the families in the edge who basically want to use her to breed more powerful children in their family lines, and she's having none of it. And then you have Declan Camerine, who turns up on her doorstep, and he's from the weird, so the parallel world that has more magic. He's very powerful, and he turns up on her doorstep and she basically tells him, go away, I'm not marrying you. Instead, he proposes that she set him 3 challenges, and if he can complete all 3 challenges, then she will come to live with him and marry him. If he doesn't, then he will leave her alone. Alongside all of this, there is a really sort of dark magic that is bleeding over into the edge, and it's eating the magic of the residents who live there. Rose and Declan need to team up because they are both very, very powerful magic users. They have to team up in order to defeat this, and along the way they learn a few things about each other that are perhaps a little bit unexpected. As much as it's sort of hard to describe and it was a bit hard to keep track of what was going on, I did really enjoy the concept of it, and I quite liked Rose and I loved her brothers. And once we got to know Declan as well, he was a really interesting character to read about. So I will continue this series. I don't know when, but I will get there. So those are the 9 books that I read for the Read Digital challenge in the last week. It was great to just read a whole bunch of stuff on my Kindle. And now that I'm home a little bit more, I'm going to hopefully read a bit more, and I'm going to keep reading stuff on my Kindle, but I am also about to go into the Owls. So I do have a set TBR for that, and I will leave a link to that video on the screen. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books and what your thoughts are on them. Or alternatively, tell me what you have been reading over the last week. I would love to hear about the books that you guys have been loving and enjoying. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.